single joy in life's gone to ground.
Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to jump right in because we talk about this a lot in class. I'm going to introduce Munk Duane. So Munk is going to tell you about himself. We're going to have a little bit of discussion. Most of the beginning, first 20 minutes or so, we're going to hear about your path, right? So how many people have me in class? Have I had a lot of jobs or a few jobs? A lot. It gets like crazy, right? My resume gets like, woo! But it all has a nice thread, right? So there's a marketing thread. So you guys can see where I get to where I go. So we're going to try and listen and see how that happens. So sometimes we are pretty concerted about it and fate works in our favor, and sometimes we just land somewhere and it happens. So we're going to learn about that. And then once the captains come in, I really want to talk about the music business. How many people took sports and entertainment marketing?
For the following students, please report to room 225
okay,
immediately.
specifically
James Casey,
learn about how to market,
James Tarosi,
sponsorships.
Nima,
We have like computer stuff where we learn how to do like
Connell Hogan
concert
Morris,
planning.
and Owen
Fantastic.
Bedard. Please report
What
to
else are we
room
doing with all the
225 immediately.
concert stuff?
Don't put me on the spot.
Concessions.
2 years ago.
I know, but we do. So we do. It gets very granular, which we don't need to get granular. But so we're going to learn about the music business, and then he's got Monk's got a really great message about being an artist, right? So those of us in DECA, right? A lot of us are like, I want to go to business school. Like I'm thinking finance, I'm thinking sports market, whatever it may be. If you're an artist, you can still be in business. I mean, you can be in business. You can be an electrician, and you can be a business, right? So there's all kinds of avenues to be a business person, right? And you know that from my class, right? I teach you everything from how to do your own budget to how to do, if you're in accounting, how to not steal money from your company, right? We do a lot about ethics. So we're going to jump right in. If you have any questions at any time, just raise your hand, okay? And I know some of you have to go to different things too, so we're going to have a break around 2:15. So if you could just kindly wait, so we have a nice flow of in and out. All right. So he's going to be talking to you, even though I'm right here. So I always interrupt.
Do it.
Just to try and drive the discussion to make sure it's relevant for you guys. So without further ado, Munk, can you tell us who you are and what you're all about?
Sure. Thanks for having me today. Good to see you guys. My name is Munk. I am a recording artist and film composer. And I live right here in Whitman, and yet I work in Hollywood. And it's a crazy thing, because we live in a world where you can do that now. You don't have to be there often, which is a nice place to visit, but if you've been, it's kind of dirty these days. So I prefer Whitman in a big way.
Nice. You told me that you were a vocalist. That was like your core.
That was my primary instrument when I went to Berkeley.
So go way back. These are high school kids.
Sure. So going
Name
back
yours,
to
what's your deal?
Going back to when I was in school, I started playing upright bass in 5th grade, and picked up bass guitar and then started singing because nobody else would.
Wait, is this part of a school program?
The high school I went to on Long Island was called Sachem.
So you're from Long Island?
Yes.
Whereabouts?
At Ronkonkoma, right about the middle of
college
the
roommates from Massapequa and New Hyde Park.
New Hyde Park, my dad worked in for 10 years. Yeah.
Such a small
Yeah. But my school was very arts focused, so I was lucky. Between our sports program and our arts program, the school was huge. My graduating class was 1,600 people.
Oh.
So competition was heavy. So you were either the best or you just weren't. You just didn't exist. So you had to scrap, whether it was the sports program or the arts program.
Did you have to choose?
Eventually I did, because I wrestled in middle school and wrestled through 9th and 10th grade, and then it just wasn't time to do both.
Okay. We have a lot of kids that,
Yeah.
I would say, we say specialized now, right? I mean, we used to be all 3 sport athletes when we were really young. And then, especially nowadays, how many people like just do lacrosse or just do baseball, right? One of the nice things is, here's someone that just did the arts, which is kind of cool. Nice model for us.
Eventually. Did have to make a choice. But that's also what I decided I wanted to do with my life. I knew from the time I was I was a sophomore in high school that I wanted to go to Berkeley. I interned at a recording studio, and that's where I learned that Berkeley existed.
I should actually step back. So are you guys familiar with, we're from here, are you guys familiar with Berkeley?
Not really.
Okay.
So Berkeley is the quintessential. I mean, there's like Juilliard, there's Berkeley.
Yeah.
Out the West Coast there might be some, but for our market specifically, like Northeast.
Well, it's all over the world now.
International.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Berkeley is it. Like you get into Berkeley, like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, Berkeley is now considered Ivy League. It's affiliated with Harvard. It's the place you want to go if you want to life in business, in the music business. And that's actually why I went there. I wanted to go to learn how to read a contract. And when I went to Berkeley, the music business program didn't exist yet. There were business classes in different curriculums like music production and engineering. There were business classes, etc. So they had a new curriculum at the time called professional music, which meant that you can borrow classes from all of them and make a curriculum. So I borrowed all the business classes, the entrepreneurship classes, because I wanted to learn how to exist in the music business as it was back then.
Sure. So you kind of had I would say premature because you were young, but a nice focus. Well,
Yeah, I was tunnel vision.
We're doing like college stuff right now, right? Recommendations and everything. And we kind of have an idea what we want, and we're told we need to know right now. And that's a really tough thing. So it's almost a blessing that you had, it's not like, you may want to call it a calling, but like you knew.
I knew from the time I was a sophomore that that was the target.
In your opinion, how did talent play into that? Like raw talent, like you were born with something that other people didn't have.
I don't know if I was to this
You don't
day.
know?
I don't know if I believe it's innate. My parents were not musical. I don't have anybody musical in my family. And I had to work extra hard.
So it's about practice.
Yeah.
All right. We know, think of the other side. We have a lot of student athletes, and every parent wants them to go D1.
Mhm.
That's why we all do club, and that's why we all do
Right.
AAU and such, right? But it's not always what happens.
Sure.
But when you have like that skill set, like sometimes you know, sometimes you don't know, and you just work at it.
Yeah.
Right. And so
I had the desire, I had the drive. I made sure that I had the skill set because I had the desire and the drive.
Sure. I mean, I think of someone like Stevie Kelly. You guys remember Stevie Kelly? Like one of the greatest basketball players that we've had. And he was like on like the B or C team growing up, right? He like wasn't on the A team, right? B team, right? Wasn't like top of the top. He worked at it and worked at it.
Mhm.
You know, now he's like, he plays in college. So
Very nice.
So keep going. So Berkeley, you get there.
Yep.
So you leave New York.
I leave New York.
Who did you leave?
I actually grew up on the Mets.
Okay, Mets.
Yeah. So talk about your underdogs.
There you go.
Although I got here in '86. So guess what happened in
Oh.
'86?
All right.
Yeah. It was a good time to be here from New York. I'm being
You guys get
facetious.
that? Okay, good.
Yes.
All right. So then you get to Berkeley.
So I got to Berkeley and
What year?
That was 1986.
86.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this was a time when you had to be the best of the best from
And
where you
Boston-
came from to get there. But when you got there, you were just one of
So many.
1,000 other kids who were the best of the best. You came from being the big fish in the small pond to being quite small. In fact, the dropout rate when I got there in '86 was 50%. It was over 50%. You usually go there and you could either take that slice of humble pie they were giving you, or you couldn't, and you left. And I remember the very first program they sent us to was something called the Singer Showcase at the Berkeley Performance Center. And you're watching all the upperclassmen who just had chops for days, like all the riffs, and just sounded amazing. And I sat there and I actually cried. I was like, I have no right to be here. This is not the place for me. And we all say that, but I'm kind of stubborn, so I stuck it out anyway. Yep.
So you do 4 years there?
I did 4 years there.
What do you do? You have a major?
My major was professional music, which now would be called the music business program.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Did you happen to be a musician that wanted to be in business? Is it usually
No, I was a
like that?
musician who wanted to be famous, but I wanted to know how to read a contract because regardless if you want to be a performer,
Sure.
there, especially in the music industry, you will get screwed. You
Yeah.
gotta know the business, and if you don't, you walk out poor.
Yeah. How many
And-
people took business law with me? Well, you're going to take business law. You have business law. I mean, we do a little bit with contract work.
Mhm.
We do a lot with tort reform and things like that. But it's really important.
Yeah.
You know, as you'll see in any business, and especially in the music business, because sometimes they own you, right?
They always own you.
Right.
They do.
Always.
Yeah, but that's what I wanted to figure out, especially at the time. It was a little premature, and eventually around the late '90s, early 2000s, the indie boom happened,
Sure.
and that finally broke
Yeah.
for the first time. But at the
Do
time,
you guys know what he means by that? So just in terms of the music business, there was like record labels that ran the
Yep.
world.
Yep.
And if you
Well,
were on there,
there still are, but there were that was the only way to do it. Yeah.
It was like when we had TV, there was 3 TV stations, right? And then cable came around. So the independent, or the indies, as you call it, the independent record labels and companies
Mhm.
came up and found who would be like an independent person that they might know. Like, I want to say like like Kate Bush, didn't she just have like a
No, she was signed to Columbia.
Was she at Columbia?
Yeah.
Who can you think of that they might know? Is there anyone
I
know?
mean, that's already 20 years ago, so I don't know.
Not even,
Yeah,
right? So everyone had like, you got picked up or scooped up by like these big companies. And then now there was this opportunity that you could get a crack at it.
Yeah, there was a point in the music industry around the late 90s, early 2000s when artists just started saying, why do I need you? If I could afford promotion, if I could afford radio promotion and tour support, and I don't need the record label, because the record label would sign you and give you money that was in advance. So it wasn't your money, you owed it back. So the way that you made your record, the way that you went on tour, the way that you supported everything you needed to do for the first 5 years of that contract, you owed that label money back. And they owned your music publishing. So any money that your songs made, they got a big chunk of, and you got the small piece of it. So it took about 35 years for the industry to wake up, because the music industry as we knew it then started in the 50s. To realize, well, maybe I don't need to have 10 million fans. Maybe I don't need to sell millions of records.
Yeah.
Maybe if I owned 100% of it, I'd only have to sell a couple 100,000. And I'd make 5 times as much money as I would on the label.
Sure.
So a lot of people started waking up to that. Ani DeFranco, I don't know if you know who she is, singer-songwriter. She was one of the first that was like lauded as the champion of indie artists at the time. And then major acts started to say, you know what, I see the light here. Radiohead said, I don't need the label anymore. Nine Inch Nails said, I don't need the label anymore. Prince fought with his label to get the rights to his music publishing back for years.
So we do SWOT analysis, and we do like buyer personas. And if you do a lot of them, right, in every class. So with buyer personas, so one of your psychographics, so me as probably a little bit like your age, when I was in college or when I was a young consumer, I used to listen to like WBRU.
Oh yeah,
right?
yep.
That's where all like kind of indie rock, I guess we called it alternative at the time.
BRU and ERS, which is still to this day. Yeah.
And that was like my brand. So this was like U2 before U2 had radio play,
Right.
that kind of stuff. So you can brand yourself with music, and this was a way for musicians or to have a buyer persona, a new niche market,
Right.
where they could still capitalize. So they had a market segment within a target market, in a sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
It was also the beginning of streaming, the very, very beginning of streaming with Napster. And there's a lot of arguments being made that broke the monetary model of the music industry. And it did. The only way left for performers and songwriters to make money is publishing. Publishing is everything. Even touring right now is such an expensive proposition. And you got to split that with everyone involved. And there's a lot of hands in that cookie jar.
So I have an impression that if you're a musician, and you tell me I'm wrong, so the record companies, when you record, like the record companies own the money, right? But you can make more money if you tour to support it. Do you get a big?
Well, you have to, because it's essentially not marketing your product.
Right.
If you're not on the road at that point in time, because it's a little different now, you were not marketing.
Okay.
And therefore, the very first label deal that I was offered was in 2000, right when this was happening. I got offered a deal with Atlantic Records. And
Which is
that was one of the biggest
Yeah,
in the world.
okay.
It
Okay.
still kind of is.
Yeah.
But their model was, let's just throw people against the wall, and if they stick, they stick. If they don't, they don't.
Yeah.
The deal did not have tour support. We would have had to sell gold, which is 500,000 copies out of the gate, in order to make what we were already making in our day jobs at the time. And again, this was the reason I went to Berkeley. I wanted to know what I was getting into. I hired lawyers, double-checked everything, and after 6 months of negotiating with them, I said no. And at that point, that broke up the band, because
So
this was everything we had worked for 10 years.
So you were a band, was it a Berkeley band?
No, it was.
Came up after?
Yeah, so this, the period of time between when I got to Berkeley and when I was offered this deal was 9 years.
Okay.
So the overnight successes usually take 10 years to happen. So this was around 1999, 2000. But again, what we didn't know at the time is that this indie thing was about to break. So after turning down a record deal with the biggest record company there was, I got laid off from my day job. Like a month later, but I got a severance package. So the logic at the time was, well, again, what could I do that they couldn't do if I had enough money? So I had all of a sudden money to invest from a severance package. So it was either I could play the smart play, put it in the bank, and my son had just been born, or roll the dice. And no guts, no glory. That's business. Sometimes you got to take the chances as long as they're calculated risks. So I took that money and I hired an independent promotion company to promote the album I was going to release on the label, and do radio promotion. What's that?
You already had the album. It just wasn't.
The album was done.
The music was done.
Yeah. So they did radio promotion throughout the country. They got me charted on the top 30 on about 100 different stations. They did their job. They did, and all of a sudden, people started coming out of the woodwork. The very first company that came to me was a music publishing company, and the pitch was, "Hey, do you want to be on The Sopranos?" And I laughed because to me it sounded like, "Hey, kid, you want some candy?" I really didn't know much about the publishing part of it at that time.
Had The Sopranos been out?
Yeah. So I thought to myself, well, I can continue this strategy of rolling the dice, and I can keep 100% of nothing, or I can see what happens with this. So I signed a few songs to this publishing company.
So step back. So you're in this performing, making art kind of thing, right? This comes along.
Well, art is the product. I mean,
But-
it's still business.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But this comes along, and so do you understand? Like now, it's a wildly popular and influential and kind of innovative program. Do you guys watch The Sopranos ever on streaming or anything like that? You know what it is, right? I remember watching it. Like,
Yeah.
super. I mean,
It was an
so
HBO show.
Yeah,
It was-
so
yeah.
like we got HBO just so we could watch it. That's what people
Right.
did. So when you say songs, what did you do? Did you actually just give them songs that existed, or did you write for
So
them?
these
or
were
was it
songs that
music?
were on the album, and rather than sign over the whole album, it was like a test run. I'm going to give you a few, and let's see what happens. So this publishing company got me on 2 episodes of The Sopranos, on NCIS, on CBS, on a ton of daytime stuff. All
Are
these
they like
places.
songs with vocals and such, or
Yeah.
was it background?
No,
Okay.
these are full songs.
And that was a thing too, where
Yeah.
TV shows were doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't.
Well, this
something
was
that-
new for TV
Yeah,
shows
that's
to
what
do
I
that
mean.
at the
That's
time.
what I
Yeah.
mean. Yeah. Like we are. Like I watch CSI, right? They have all kinds of songs.
Yeah.
They don't have. They're mostly instrumental. But you watch The Sopranos, and not only did The Sopranos have, what you'd watch the show, and then have like music. I have the soundtrack, right? It was like I have the soundtrack from the show.
Right.
That was like a new thing too.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
So, yeah.
Stop.
So that the interesting thing is that what I didn't know about music publishing at the time is it's lucrative. And when you license your music to television or film, there are 2 different ways to get paid. You get paid as a writer, and you get paid as the artist or as the publisher, right? So there's really 100% over here and 100% over there. And when you sign with a publishing company, when you're nobody, you're giving away 50% of one of those 100%. But that's still 150% left, which is great. I didn't really understand it at the time until I got my first ASCAP check. ASCAP is a performing rights organization. When you are a songwriter, you would sign up with ASCAP or BMI or CSAC. And I got my first royalty check about 9 months later, and again, having no expectations. And I opened it, and my jaw hit the ground. And I turned to my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife. I'm like, we're booking a trip to Aruba right now.
Can you explain royalties in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, royalties are, there's multiple components of a creative piece of a song, right? There's the publishing, which is just the rights to the song as an entity. There's the mechanical, which is the recording of the song, right? So at the time, I didn't have partners, so I had 100% of my publishing, which I gave away 50% to the publishing company. And I kept 100% of the mechanical because that's mine. And that's how you got paid. And so depending on how many times your music gets used, when it was used, where it was used. So, HBO wasn't fantastic for getting paid, but it was really high profile in terms of The Sopranos. But getting it on NCIS on a major network, they pay a lot more.
All right, stop there for a second.
Yep.
Anyone else coming over?
That was just.
You guys are not. Okay. You guys go to work. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
So guys, just joining.
Harry.
One of the things, if you gotta go, we're doing a crisscross. We're talking about how, this is Munk Duane. So we're talking about how He's licensed his music, and we would just ask a question about royalties. So a lot of this is very specific to the industry, but how he was able to kind of carve his niche when it comes to, he was doing stuff for TV shows. You guys watch The Sopranos, or know The Sopranos? Heard of it? He had music on that show, NCIS.
Yeah.
And keep going, honey.
Yeah, sure. So, in a nutshell, that's how you make money on the royalty aspect of it. And ASCAP will collect that money for you and send it to you quarterly as it gets used. Well, in a lot of cases, 9 months later. The interesting thing is that once you start to kind of get to be a known quantity at that point, you get requests to write for certain things. So I got a request from Grey's Anatomy to write for something. I got a request from whatever. And they have music supervisors on these shows, and their job is to
really?
place music in the episode. Now, anybody who's ever watched Grey's Anatomy knows it's like at least a half dozen songs in an episode. And each one of those is placed by a company called the Chop Shop. And their job is to go out and find artists that do interesting versions of songs that exist or original music that fits the storyline. So you'll get a creative brief from the music supervisor that says, here's the scene, here's what it's about. It's 5 o'clock on the East Coast. Can you have it to us by noon tomorrow, West Coast time? And you literally have to drop everything, pull an all-nighter, write, record, mix, master, send it off, which you're bleary-eyed to do this in an 8-hour stretch at the end of your day, and forget about it and hope that it either got used or it didn't. But you're constantly building your library as that
I
happens.
was gonna say, as a creator, do you have like a shelf?
Yes.
With, you can pull and customize.
Right, so you build that library, and maybe it didn't work for the thing that actually was the request, but it might work for something else. So the more you have to pull from, the better off your odds are. Bless you. So you get fast at that because you have to. If you're gonna actually turn it around and be the person they call, it's like, I just have to get this skill set down, right, and crank this out. Once you do that, then they start coming to you saying, hey, we want to score this film. Are you available to actually be the composer for the film? And that leads you in a whole different path where you become a full-fledged 100% film composer where you're writing every piece of music in the film.
Okay. Is that something you've done? Or
That's something I've done. That's something I continue to do. Yeah.
Oh, neat. Okay. How do you, so I feel like you have all these hats. You're wearing one now, but you have a bunch of different hats. So one of them, we're talking about composing and just real business side of it. Right? This is where you can make money, right? Not that you can't make money doing
So it's
other
licensing.
stuff.
Yeah.
Right, and licensing.
Yeah.
How about performing? Is that like your sweet spot? Is that like you're never going to give that up? Or you're like, or do you feel really fulfilled doing this other stuff as well?
I love doing the other stuff. I also love performing. So when you're an independent artist, it's about diversification. It's not about any one basket you're putting all those eggs in. It has to be like, I need a row of baskets, and they need to be going all at the same time. Yeah. Performance will help me pay for promotion for something I need to release independently, so I have more clout to get that licensed so I can compose the next film.
Right.
And it's all marketing yourself.
Yep. So in marketing, where are my marketing guys? Who's taking marketing? Got you. We talk about 5 types of promotion. We like to bucket things, right? We got 5 types of promotion. Chase, go ahead. Which one do you pay for?
Oh, don't put me on the spot.
You're already on the spot. Which one do you pay for? Harry?
Advertisement.
Which one's free?
Publicity.
Which one do you have a contact info?
Direct.
Direct mail. Chase, which one is face-to-face? Humans.
Personal selling.
Personal selling. And what's the bucket with everything else, like event-driven? Perfect. You hear those?
Yeah.
They probably all resonate. You know what those are, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, I found you from a Patriot Ledger story on my Facebook, right? And I was like, wow. So that's like publicity 101. How did that come about? How did you get rid of it?
When you are going to release a single or an album, you need at least a 25-day, I take a 40-day lead into that release. And into that release, you send out press releases and you have a press list. So whether it's social media, blogs, traditional media, they're all on this list. And you send it out, and you send out just a general press release. This is what's going on. This is why it's a big deal. Looking for coverage, kind of thing. And if they find it interesting, they get back to you, and you have press magically. It's a wonderful thing. For blogs, there are actual organizations or sites like Muso Soup or things like that they curate that to all these blogs and influencers and playlists, etc. And they, that's how you ratchet up your Spotify numbers. But all this promotion has to be done prior to the release and then 6 weeks after the release. So you are going for a full,
Because you're getting reviews.
3 months.
You're still printing,
Oh, yeah.
or you're still
Yeah,
posting about reviews.
that release came out October 14th, and those reviews will continue to come
Yeah.
in probably until the end of November.
Because someone will read a review and they're like,
Right.
I want to hear it. And I wouldn't say it's viral, but that's kind of how it works. in a
Yeah,
sense.
well, that's how you
Industry.
found out about it.
Right.
I ended up getting interviewed by WBZ
Yeah.
a week after that because of the same piece, so.
So I used to be a publicist.
Yeah.
I used to call up the morning guy on the WBZ and VUR and be like, hey, I got a client.
Yeah.
Do you want to feature him?
Right.
So there's like all this engine behind it. Sometimes it's serendipitous where people are hearing, but sometimes it's a real concerted effort.
Yeah.
And that's the business of it. Can you let them in? Thank you. So you guys, those of you in my marketing class, I got a bunch of you in here. When we start going over promotion real specifically, I want you to remember this when we do publicity, right? And nothing's for free. Are you
Nope.
paying the firm to do that, or are you doing that yourself?
A large part of it I'm doing myself.
Okay.
I have paid people in the past.
All right.
I've learned how to do it.
Yeah.
So I'll pay at the point where I just need help because it just becomes too much to do.
Yeah.
But I don't
Like
pay
when you
anywhere
do
near
your
as much
real
as I
job.
used to.
Oh, I hear it. Okay.
Yeah, those campaigns would run for a 6-week run like that, anywhere from like 10 grand to 15 grand back in the day. That's a lot for an indie artist especially. So that's a lot of gigs
Yeah.
to be able to afford that.
Totally. So I'm gonna stop for a second. I know we've got some music students here too, right? Both vocalists like yourself, and then also musicians like yourself. Did you guys have any like questions before we move on to some general stuff? Awesome. Can you tell Munk your name?
Hi, I'm Nick.
Hey, Nick.
I was wondering if did you think that like signing to like a record label as like a small artist was like a bad idea, or should you wait until you kind of go mainstream before you think about it?
Well, so you need to do both these days, right? In order to get signed right now, you need to prove your numbers, right? Your social media numbers have to be through the roof. Your followers have to be through the roof. Your Spotify listeners have to be numerous, like, 50,000 plus. Because we live in a world where we can actually do that now. And frankly, it's made them a little bit lazier because they know that you can do that, so they want to see that you can hustle. And then they'll start talking to you. Unfortunately, it's not just about musical capability anymore. It's about your ability to market yourself. And you look at somebody like The Weeknd, like a great example of that. It's become where you can't just be an artist, you have to be a marketer. It's required.
Are you saying that he's not a good vocalist?
I'm saying he's great.
You think
I'm
he's
saying he's a
great?
great example of somebody who knows how to market themselves and make it interesting.
Do we know people that are marketed really well that should maybe not be where they are? You can
That's not up to me to
Not
say.
up to you to say?
Nope.
Are there
It's all a matter of preference.
Are there those that exist?
Again, that's a matter of preference, right? Because for anyone, I would dunk on someone who loves them.
They're all, yeah,
Yeah.
I get you.
Yeah.
Any other music questions? Oh, good.
Yeah, it was good. I'm Brian Rowe. I'm one of the instrumental music teachers. I'm also one of the teachers who teaches music technology. Mr. Daigle was just in here, who also teaches music technology with me. I've got a bunch of students in here who are learning how to use a digital audio workstation,
Nice.
learning to use MIDI instruments, learning to record. Can you tell us, even on on a basic level, what you use for gear, what your kind of go-to digital audio workstation
Yeah, no,
is?
I'm a gear hog, right? So, although I'm a minimalist when it comes to it, if it doesn't get used, I sell it. But primarily, my DAW is Reason.
Nice.
I use Reason because it's the best of both worlds in terms of being a DAW and soft synths and all the options. I also have a fairly large selection of hardware in terms of hardware synthesizers and MPC and the Akai Force. It really depends on the style of music you're making, but that's where it all starts. And I'm a guitar player and bass player and drummer, and that's my thing as well. So it's a mixture of all of these things. And there's just massive amounts of plugins and, you name it. I don't even know, there's so many, I don't even know where to start.
Nice. I saw on your website, yeah, I'm a bass player as well. You play a Reverend. I also play
Yes.
Reverend bass, so
Oh, nice.
lots of good kudos.
Yeah, I'm a reverend artist.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I'm not an artist.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I signed on with them in 2015.
Very cool. Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
What does that mean?
That means that I endorse their products and they endorse me. And that's a wonderful thing.
Is this a monetary thing?
It's not well, it's a monetary thing anytime I want something new.
Oh, they give you get you get merch.
Yes. Well, I get the product. Not 100%, but at a significant discount.
So is there any requirement that, like, when you're in a music video like that you were just in, that you would have to make sure you use their stuff? Is it like a sponsorship or not?
It is that. So it depends. This is a fairly loose deal, so I could play something else, but I feel like I should be playing their products.
Okay.
Not to mention I signed on with them because I'm a massive fan. Yeah. So.
All right. Nice.
Yeah.
A music question? Can you just give us your name?
Yeah, I'm Devin. How would you say that, like, going to Berkeley and, like, getting a formal, like, education in music, like, how big of a role did that play in, like, setting you on the path to, like...
As opposed to not going to school and doing
yeah,
it
like,
just...
regardless of your musical ability, like, being able to, I don't know, I guess having the connections to market yourself.
So the connections I made at Berkeley, I still have to this day. So that was critical. A lot of the people I met at that time, people I interacted with at that time, went on to do specific things. I think you can do it without it, but I think the advantage that it gives you in terms of teaching you tools you won't have otherwise, or will take you years to learn otherwise. You just come out with an advantage. You just know a little bit more, you're a little better placed, you just have more in the toolbox to go at it with. And again, the networking that starts there, and the work ethic you learn there, and the humility that you learn there is critical. Again, like I said, when I got there, my first reaction sitting there was, I don't belong here. I'm not good enough to be here. And if you can stick it out through that, then that's a pretty good example of what the rest of the music industry is like. People will tell you you're terrible every single day. They'll say you're not good enough. They'll tell you all the things that will crush your soul, and you learn the skills to just fight through it. It doesn't mean it hurts any less, but it means you're better. You have more armor on to deal with it.
Any other questions? Before we move to our sort of final segment, I wanted to talk a little bit, because someone asked me this today.
Sure.
Personally, right? They said, Mr. D, like, what's your favorite genre of music? And I'm like, I like show tunes, right? I like rock, I like alternative, I like, pop, you name it.
Yep.
I like The Weeknd. And I think about you guys, right? And some of the music I hear you guys. Your genre is a little bit more finite than it was when we were younger.
I think that's a matter of perspective.
You think so?
I do.
It depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
Come to my class.
Yeah.
You'll hear some of the same things.
The music that these guys are coming up with is born of so many more influences than the music that
That's
we
what I'm
grew up
getting to.
with.
So that's what I'm getting to. So and someone then asked me, like, what's his genre?
Right.
It's all over. I would say I feel like if I listen to a bunch of your collection, I feel blues.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I like a Susan Tedeschi or a Derek Trucks or something. I feel it, but you have, I don't know, it's just different. Like, what do you say if someone were to ask you?
Someone asked me what my favorite genre?
No, what's your genre? Like, what do you?
Alt R&B. Alternative R&B. It's a little bit different. It's what we used to call neo soul.
Okay.
And so it's evolved into this thing called alternative R&B, which means it has some of those flavors, but it also borrows from other areas that have nothing to do with R&B and soul. Okay. And it makes this kind of neo soul vibe.
Nice. What are some of your? You just alluded to it. What are some of your influences? Influences.
God, Prince, Stevie Wonder. Those are my top two.
Sometimes I hear like an Elvis Costello in a sense.
It's funny you say that, and a lot of people do, and I do like Elvis Costello, but he was not an early influence on me.
No. And then I think I told you I have to hear Lenny Kravitz.
Yep.
I talked about other people like.
But it's all coming from that same root,
right?
That same R&B, Motown, funk. We're all coming from that same influence.
There's like a heavy rhythm, and then a bass. Yeah. So I think what's interesting about what you do is, like, you can actually, when you get those requests for different moods or whatever the music director's telling you,
right,
you can kind of adapt. And, you have a lot of flexibility.
You have to.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you don't,
it's part of the gig.
Then you're in trouble.
Then writing on demand is not for you.
Yeah, there's no
you could do other things, for sure, in terms of being an artist, but having to have that ability to pivot on a dime because you just got this request and you have less than 24 hours to turn it around.
I didn't
It's
even
just
know that.
it's a muscle you just develop.
I didn't even know something like that would exist.
Yeah.
That's good. I thought it would take like forever, right?
Yeah, no,
It's-
it should.
Yeah.
And when there's a difference between art and commerce, right? If I'm putting out a release for myself, I'm going to take my time. I'm gonna scrutinize the hell out of it. I'll finish it and walk away for a while, and then come back and see if it's something I still feel good about.
Yeah.
If it's something I'm writing because I'm getting paid to write it. So I've also, worked for corporations. I've written music for Bose and for a company called Hatch, which is kind of like an Alexa that helps you sleep. And they hired me to write a whole channel for them. So I had to produce music for an entire channel. It was 10 hours of music. 10 hours of music. I had
Helping people fall asleep?
Yeah, but it's all scientifically formulated. So they give you this, at this point in the program, it has to have this feel and this frequency range. At this point, it has to do this thing. And
That's incredible.
each piece was over an hour long. And I only had from July till the end of August to do it. So that was literally no sleeping for 2 months, up till at least 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 nights a week. And
Did you go back to Aruba?
It's lucrative.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. But it also, writing 10 hours of music on demand, I mean, I don't think, prior to that, I'd written 10 hours of music in 5 years. 10 hours of music. I mean, that's crazy. But that's just, like I said, if you develop the muscle,
Yeah.
you can do it. And it's another, again, being an independent artist as a business requires diversification, and you grab gigs as they come.
Answer me this. What's your favorite part of doing what you do? And however you want to define it.
The interesting thing is, so it's a phenomenon I call being sub-famous, which means you've heard my music and you have no idea who I am, and I'm totally okay with that. I've had music in the Super Bowl halftime show. I wrote for CBS Sports for 3 years for the NFL, NCAA, March Madness, all this stuff. And you have absolutely, if you've ever watched a game at any point, heard what I do, I'm fine with that. I'm a dad. I got 3 kids. My son graduated from here in 2018. My daughter's a freshman here now. I get to be home with the kids. I still get to live out my dream, and I still get to live in a nice place to raise a family like here and not have to move everybody to Hollywood and be crazy. And then when I get to do a film, I get to go to a red carpet premiere in Hollywood. So I kind of get the best of both worlds. Yeah.
So you're an artist, right? You grew up in the arts, and a lot of people think, oh, that has to be a hobby.
No.
And I can't really.
Oh my
consider-
God.
Tell me. I want that message about. And it doesn't matter if it's arts, right? Maybe it's something that you love to do, and maybe your family doesn't support it.
Well, so
whatever it may be,
yeah,
right?
This is an interesting one. So I actually just gave a lecture at Berkeley, and I was talking to these students about the same thing. If you wanted to be a lawyer, if you wanted to be a doctor, if you wanted to be a policeman, any of that stuff, your parents would never ask you what your plan B was. If you wanted to be a musician, if you wanted to work in the music business, and there are a lot of different gigs in the music business, or in the entertainment business, or anything like that, their first instinct, which is out of nothing but love, but their first instinct is, what's your plan B? What's your backup in case that fails? I absolutely understand where that's coming from, and it's the most detrimental thing anyone can do to somebody else. Because now you have that seed of doubt planted in your brain by people who love you the most, and so you're thinking in the back of your mind about failure, which in any other profession, this is just, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to learn these skills, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to go do this thing. This is the same way. And in fact, in a lot of cases, especially when I was talking to these Berkeley students who were all graduating college, I'd ask, they all felt like they were beginners. And I said, how long have you been playing? I've been playing since I'm 5. How long have you been playing? I've been playing since I'm 9. How long have you been playing? These people have already have over a decade into this craft, which a lot of people coming out of college don't have. These are not beginners, not to mention they were coming from one of the best schools in the world. So that seed of doubt is is terrible. And my parents did the same thing to me, and I learned a completely different skill. And I've had other jobs in my time. I actually worked for 8 years in national security for the Department of Defense as a completely different gig, because I had that in the back of my head. And it's coming from a good place, but there are so many ways to do this, and the fact is, there's only 100% in the pie. And if you are not putting 100% into something, you are increasing your chances of failing. And this is the time to do it. From now until you hit 30, until your early 30s, you got a great run at doing whatever you want. My son, who graduated from here, is now in films, and he's acting, and he just did Black Panther 2, and he just did I can't even name them all. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. He's a graduate from this school. He went to college at Massasoit. He was kind of hating what he was doing. He was learning like behind the scenes stuff for camera. One of his teachers said, "Hey, you're a good looking kid. Why don't you go to Boston Casting, see what happens?" And my son's like, "Okay," because it never even occurred to him to do this. And the very first thing he got was The Society on Netflix. He did the whole first season, which there was only one season. And it just kept snowballing after that. What's that?
Where does he live?
He still lives with me.
Oh,
He still lives right here in Whitman. But it's all doable. And I was the one that said, college will still be there. This opportunity is in front of you right this second. If you wait, it might not be there again. Take 6 months off. Let's see what happens. I'll fully support you in this. See where this goes. If it doesn't work out, we'll go back to school. We'll figure it out. And now it's been 5 years, and he's in a lot of stuff.
That's awesome.
And he's doing really well. Yeah.
So, kind of to conclude, I want everyone to get that takeaway, right? So especially for anyone that's here that's a musician, I mean, there are avenues. It is a real thing, right? And there is a way to make it work. Find your way. And then also for those of us that are, especially my seniors right now doing their college, if anyone did early action on November 1, right, you feel relieved, but now the real drama happens, right? Stick to your plan. Like, come up with your plan and stick to it. Be great.
Evolve it.
Yeah, evolve it.
Keep your knees bent, right? Flexibility is key. But this idea of a plan B will take you off your path. And there might be a time for that. That's fine. Where you guys are at right now, you got to just go. This is the time. This is where you get all that momentum, and this is where all that energy is going to come from. And this energy that you have right now for anything you're passionate about will take you through the next 10 years of your life and get you where you got to go. And believe me, it starts to wane after a while. You'll get to a point where you do get tired. You're not even close to that yet, which is cool. It's just fuel.
All right. So I just want to thank you again.
Oh, my pleasure.
This has been great. For DECA, we'll debrief on this at we'll kind of everything we talked about has something from our textbook, believe it or not. We'll try and make some applications, and then for you music students, I hope this was valuable for you.
For sure, you probably got a lot of clicks on your website today.
Oh, super!
That was part of our kind of opening of class was checking out your website, getting to know you a little bit, checking out some of your music, and also coming up with some questions as well. I'm like, well, we'd like to ask you.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
A lot of it was gear related. One question we had because a lot of our classes designed in, we have sort of almost like how you work as a freelance musician. We have someone comes to you with a need, with a task.
Right.
We did a songwriting, write something in song form project. Mm-hmm. One of our first things when we were starting to use the digital audio workstation was just using and manipulating MIDI. Right. And we just kind of finished up our unit on sampling and using samples in our music as well. But when you go and compose something, what was one of the great questions we had? What is one of your, I think, pieces of music that you're most proud of? When you look back at your pieces that you've made, one kid said that today, and I'm like, holy cow, we're bringing that in. Because I know you probably write tons of music, and you write stuff for yourself, you write stuff for commercially, but there's got to be at least a handful of tunes that you've written.
I think I'm going to be real cliche like every artist in the world. It's always the last song you wrote.
Yeah, right?
It really is. It's like the last thing I did, I'm like, oh, that was pretty good. And then you write another one, I'm like, oh, it's better than the last thing. The last thing's not that good anymore. I'm on to the next one. That is really impossible question. It's like,
All
you
your
know,
babies?
who's your favorite child? Yeah, that's a tough one.
You got one dropping soon.
What's that?
You got something dropping soon.
Yeah, on the 11th, I have a new single.
On the 11th.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Because I know Myth was like a single. Like,
Yep.
Are these part of an album, or are these just, how do you do it now?
Because we live in a world where people don't listen to albums
Okay.
anymore, and it sucks, but it's true. So the nice thing about that from a marketing perspective, when you release an album, like I was saying before, you have about a 6-week run after the album's released to promote it. But it's an album.
With all the songs.
That's it. 6 weeks, and you're done.
Yeah.
And either it clicked or it didn't. When you release singles, you can do that every 2 to 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And you have another shot every single time of another round of promotion. And it just keeps you out there longer. And it gives you it just gives you better odds of being heard and adding to playlists and et cetera, et cetera. So, and you would run that, I would do 3 at a time. So that puts me out there for about 2 to 3 months. And then that's it, because it's too much.
Yeah.
It's saturation.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any final questions? All right, well, Munk, thanks again.
Oh.
We will be inviting you back. I don't know for what, but
Sure.
you're part of Whitman Hanson.
Anytime.
Now, so
Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you guys.